recording. We will be recording this session so that we can post it to our website. And it looks like there we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie DeFonso, and I am the director here in Undergraduate Financial Aid. Thank you for joining us today. I just want to take a moment to introduce the folks who are on this webinar with me today. So we are here today to talk about, this is our new series, Fridays with Financial Aid. We did one session last month. And then this month, our session is covering loans and outside scholarships. I have two of my colleagues here, Nick, who will be talking with you about loans, and Sarah, who will be talking with you about outside scholarships. And then we've got a few staff who will be behind the scenes. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, and staff will be answering questions live throughout the presentation. And then they will feed questions to Nick and Sarah to kind of answer Q&As at the end of their respective sections. So again, just want to thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Nick.
Hi, everyone. As Carrie mentioned, I'm Nick Rendon. I'm one of the assistant directors in the UFA office here at Yale. So today we're going to cover what educational loans are, what they can be used for, choosing which type of loan is best for you, how to apply, and repayment options. So what are educational loans and what can they be used for? So educational loans are loans that are borrowed from federal and or private lenders that students and or their parents can borrow to cover college-related expenses, such as tuition, fees, housing, meals, books, supplies, and miscellaneous and personal expenses. So educational loans need to be paid back and can be paid back right away, or you can defer repayment until after you graduate. There are two different types of educational loans, federal and private, but we'll touch more on those types of loans later. So what is loan interest and how does it work? So interest is defined as a fee that lenders charge a borrower for borrowing money. And it's usually expressed as a percentage of the amount that you borrow. So like any other type of loan, you'll have to repay the principal balance, which is the amount of loan that you borrowed, and then any monthly interest that is accrued over the life of the loan based on that percentage. So there are two different types of interest. We have fixed and variable. Fixed interest means that the interest rate for the loan is fixed until the loan or the total balance is paid off. And then variable interest fluctuates over time because it's tied to the underlying benchmark interest rate or index that changes periodically. So the two different types of loans, we have federal and private. Federal loans are offered by the U.S. Department of Education to students and their biological or adoptive parents. And students must be U.S. citizens or permanent residents to borrow these loans. They also have to be enrolled at least half-time, which is 1.5 or more Yale credits. And then private loans are available through banks, credit unions, and online lenders. And most lenders offer private loans to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and international borrowers. So students and their biological and or adoptive parents can apply for private loans. And if a student were to apply for a private student loan, they would need to apply for this loan with a co-signer or a co-borrower, which is typically a parent or family member with established credit who is willing to repay the private student loan if the student is unable to after graduation. So it is important to note that international students applying for private student loans will need to apply with a co-signer or co-borrower who is a U.S. citizen. Choosing which loan is best for you. So let's start with the pros and cons of federal loans. So the pros of federal loans is they have fixed interest rates, flexible repayment options, and then no early repayment penalties. And then some cons for federal loans are the current 24-25 academic year interest rates are higher than what they have been in prior years, and some private loan options, and then origination / loan borrowing or processing fees. So these are processing fees that the federal government assesses for student and parent federal loan borrowers. It's a fee. The fee is a percentage of the total loan borrowed and reduces the amount of the loan that is credited to your student's account. And then let's go over the private loan pros and cons. So pros of private loans is they have very competitive interest rates for borrowers with good credit. There are no borrowing limits if approved. And then you can borrow for multiple academic years and lock in your interest rate. And then the cons of private loans, there's fewer repayment options when you do enter repayment. Private loans typically require undergraduate students to apply with a cosigner or co-borrower, as we discussed earlier. And then there's a wide range of interest rates if you're approved. All right, so we discussed the pros and cons of federal loans. How do we apply for them? So first, students need to submit a FAFSA or complete their financial aid requirements posted to their Yale Hub. Then the student and or parent need to submit the federal student and or parent loan request form that is found on our website. So you do not need to submit a loan request through federal student aid. So here is our federal student loan request form. So for this form, students need to log into the form by accessing it through our website. They can log in with their Yale Net ID and password, and then enter their name, their student ID, their Yale email address, and then select their class level, and then the amount they'd like to borrow based on their class level, and then sign and submit the form. And then for first time, if we can go back, Sarah, for first-time federal student loan borrowers, you will need to complete online entrance counseling and a master promissory note. So entrance counseling is a guided questionnaire meant to help borrowers understand their responsibilities in taking out a loan. And then the master promissory note is an agreement to repay the loan. So now we'll go over and take a look at the federal parent loan request form. So for this form specifically, the Yale student needs to initiate the request by logging into the form through our website, using their Yale Net ID and password, and then they'll enter their parent borrower's name and email address. And then an email will be sent to that parent borrower to complete the federal parent loan application on the next slide. So here's the federal parent loan request form that is also found on our website, but will be linked in that email to the parent borrower after the Yale student initiates the request. So the parent borrower will have to enter their personal information, such as their name, their address, their social security number, date of birth. Then they'll select the amount that they'd like to borrow before signing and submitting the form. So for federal parent loan borrowers, they'll have to sign a master promissory note for every federal parent loan that they borrow. So they'll have to reapply each year if they're interested in borrowing this parent loan each year that you're enrolled at Yale. And it will typically take anywhere from 3 to 4 business days for both the federal student loan and the federal parent loan to hit your student account in Yale Pay once all the loan requirements have been met. So now we'll talk about how to apply for private loans. So we recommend researching private loan options on our website, which has a lot of great information on loan options, interest rates, and best practices. We also have a very useful tool through Elm Select that we'll go over on the next slide. But before we do that, let's talk about, once you've done your research on our website, and if you've done research outside of our website, you're more than welcome to do that. We recommend narrowing down the amount of private loans that you want to borrow to 3 or 4, and then you would apply through each lender's website. So once you're approved, it's recommended that you compare and contrast the different loan interest rates and repayment options for those loan applications that you submitted, and then select the private loan that works best for you and your family before signing the paperwork online for that loan. And then it'll take anywhere from like 3 to 5 business days for the private loan funds to hit your student account in Yale Pay. So here is Yale's Select website, which can be found through our loans website on our financial aid page. So this is a comprehensive list of all private loans that Yale students and their families have borrowed in the past 3 years, and allows you to compare the different loan interest rates and repayment options. It's really a good starting point for you to see what the different current interest rates are in the market, and also to see what, Yale students are currently borrowing. But please note that you are not required to borrow from this list. If you have a working relationship with a bank or a lender that's not listed on this list, you're more than welcome to apply for a loan through that lender. All right, so let's talk about loan repayment options. So all federal and most private lenders allow borrowers to defer repayment until after graduation or before the student drops below half-time enrollment, whichever comes first. So there are 2 different types of federal loan repayment options. You have fixed and income driven, and borrowers can choose from these options before and during repayment, which is an important note. So the fixed options have a fixed repayment length ranging anywhere from 10 to 25 years. The standard plan has a fixed monthly payment for 10 years. The graduated has a monthly payment that increases every 2 years, and it takes 10 years to pay off the loan through that payment plan. And then the extended plan has a monthly payment that is fixed or graduated and can be paid off in over 25 or up to 25 years. So to participate in the graduated plan, borrowers must have borrowed over $30,000 in federal loans. Now, the income-driven repayment options for federal loans have monthly payments that range anywhere from 5 to 20% of the borrower's discretionary income. It can be paid over anywhere from 20 to 25 years. It is important to note that currently a federal court issued an injunction that is currently preventing the U.S. Department of Education from implementing income-driven repayment plans. So we recommend checking the federal student aid website for any updates and more information on this, because it is ever changing. And then finally, private loans offer fixed repayment options with fixed monthly payments anywhere from 5 to 20 years in length. So it is important to note that private lenders typically only offer borrowers 1 to 2 fixed repayment options that can't go, you can't change them. So as we discussed earlier with federal loans, you do have that flexibility when you're in repayment to change your payment plan according to, whatever your financial situation is during repayment. All right, so let's go over using an educational loan to offset or cover out-of-pocket educational related expenses. So to recap what educational loans can be used for: tuition, fees, housing, meals, books, and supplies, including a laptop. So let's play out a scenario here where a student wants to purchase a laptop but doesn't have the cash they need to purchase it. So the student can either purchase a laptop with their credit card or use an educational loan to do so. So credit card interest rate, as we know, is variable and currently averages around 25%. And once you make a purchase on a laptop, on a credit card for a laptop in this scenario, you'll have to start making monthly payments as in the same month that you make that purchase. Whereas the current academic year federal student loan interest rates are 6.53%, and you can defer repayment on that loan until after you graduate. So if a student were to use a federal student loan to pay for a laptop, the following must apply to your situation. So the loan funds will first be applied to your Yale Pay account, and your Yale Pay must have a 0 balance. Once the loan funds are applied to your account, you can request a refund through Yale Hub to reimburse or offset those out-of-pocket expenses for the purchase of a laptop. But do know, as we discussed earlier, in order for this, in order to access these funds, you do need to have all of your loan requirements met. So the entrance counseling, master promissory note, you need to have a zero balance in yield pay. And then the loan, then you can sign up for direct deposit and have the loan funds deposited to your bank account through yield pay. Now to recap, let's go to the next slide. So yeah, so what we went over today, we went over federal and private educational loan options and how they need to be paid back and when they can be paid back. We discussed the varying interest rates and repayment options for each loan, and then the qualifications for that as well. And then federal and private loans both have their pros and cons, but we definitely recommend starting your research or your loan research on our website, and then asking your personal financial aid counselor for any if you have any questions. But does anyone have any questions for us today about educational loans?
I don't see anything in the Q&A. I didn't see anything through the chat. So thank you very, very much, Nick. We really appreciate you joining us today and talking a bit about loans. And I think we will move on to Sarah to talk about outside scholarships.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Badan, and I will be presenting today on outside scholarships and providing a overview of definitions as to what is considered an outside scholarship or resource, how to report that information to our office, the adjustment that occurs to the financial aid offer versus the impact to the bill, the technology reimbursement policy, as well as other types of reimbursement that can be considered. And finally, I will touch briefly on how outside scholarships impact the summer term. So to start with, what is an outside scholarship or resource? Well, this is a form of gift aid that does not need to be paid back. And there are two different general categories. The first bullet here, what is an outside scholarship? We are talking about merit-based funding that is coming from an external resource. So not coming from Yale or the federal government. There also are what are called entitlement grants, and tuition benefits are also considered an entitlement grant. Generally, these are grants that are awarded from the federal government, such as a Pell Grant or the federal SEOG grant. There are also state grants, and then also a tuition benefit coming from a parent who may be employed by a university and is receiving a benefit against tuition. Next slide, please. How to report an outside resource to our office. There is a form out on the financial aid website that is called the outside resource update form. This is the form that would be need to be completed to submit to the financial aid office. You're not including on this form a few different types of funding. So federal grants and loans are not considered an outside resource for this form. The Yale Scholarship or the Questbridge Scholarship should not be reported. VA benefits and ROTC benefits do not need to be reported on this form. That is actually an entirely separate process. You do, however, need to report any outside resource, regardless of it being paid to Yale or directly to the student, as it needs to be counted for financial aid purposes. This is a screenshot of the first part of the outside scholarship form. The first section is really just providing student information. It is helpful if you provide your student ID number on the form. That is the ID number that starts with a 9, and it is a 9-digit number. You can find it on your ID card, and it is also the account number on your bill in Yale Pay. This second section includes some disclosures and also a drop down to indicate whether or not you are receiving any kind of outside scholarship or resource. And then there are a few checkboxes beneath to indicate whether this is a new resource that you are reporting or if you are reporting a change to a previously reported outside resource. This next section of the form, this is where you are actually reporting the information for each resource. The first field that says name of scholarship and resource, you are reporting the name of the scholarship. So for example, the John Smith Scholarship. The resource type column, you will indicate, is this an outside scholarship or is it a tuition benefit as I defined on the previous slide. The awarding agency. So sometimes a bank or some other agency is sending the actual payment to Yale, and that is the information that you need to report here. So if your John Smith Scholarship is being funded by Wells Fargo Bank, you are going to indicate Wells Fargo Bank as the awarding agency. The next column, you're going to report the amount of the scholarship, then indicate whether it is one time or a renewable scholarship or resource, meaning it is going to be received in future years. The payment schedule. In this column, you are indicating, is the amount going to be received all in one payment, or will it be distributed over the full academic year, meaning fall and spring? If that's the case, you would put 2 payments. And finally, the last column is where you will indicate if the check is going to be made payable to Yale or if it will be payable directly to you as the student. I will note that any resource that is paid directly to Yale does get reported to the financial aid office, and we will update our records so that it will appear as a memo in Yale Pay. If, however, the resource is paid directly to the student, then it will not appear as a memo on the bill. If you need those funds to help cover a balance, then you will be responsible for sending a payment directly to Yale. Some outside agencies do require that paperwork be completed either by the student or the financial aid office or both. Occasionally, the registrar may also need to provide information as well. So it is your responsibility as the student to ensure that you have completed all necessary paperwork for the outside agency. If the agency needs something to be completed by the university, that paperwork needs to come directly to the financial aid office. So you will send the form directly to our office for processing. If it requires that another department within the university needs to complete it as well, then we will contact them to complete their portion. And again, this should come directly to Yale and not be submitted to IDOC. And again, make sure that you are completing all necessary steps or paperwork that you are responsible for. There are some outside agencies that have portals that need to be reviewed or completed. The student must have completed all their necessary paperwork with the agency in order for the university to be able to do our part. So please keep in mind of deadlines and any paperwork that you need to complete. How do outside scholarships affect your financial aid offer? For this slide, we are talking about specifically outside scholarships, as I defined before as merit scholarships. I will note that any type of entitlement grant, such as a tuition benefit, federal grants, Yale Club, for example, any type of entitlement grant, those reduce the Yale scholarship dollar for dollar. For the purpose of this slide, again, we are talking about outside scholarships specifically. The amount will first reduce the student share on the award. So for domestic students, that amount is $3,700, and international, it is $2,100. Any amount of the outside resource that exceeds the student share will then reduce Yale scholarship dollar for dollar. Outside scholarships do not replace the parent share or reduce the parent share. As far as the bill itself, if a check is sent to Yale and there is a balance on the account, the payment is first going to be applied towards that balance to bring it to zero. And if there's any excess remaining, students may request a refund to access those funds. As Nick explained before, how you go about requesting the refund, you submit a request through Yale Hub, and the student accounts office will review that information and process a refund. There also is a section in Yale Hub where you would be able to set up direct deposit as well. That is all handled by student accounts. The financial aid office is not involved in the actual refund process itself. So now we are going to talk about the technology reimbursement policy. A few things to note. To be eligible for this technology reimbursement, as a student, you must have outside scholarships that exceed the $3,700 or $2,100 student share, depending on whether or not you are a domestic versus an international student. The outside agency must also allow their funds to cover the cost of technology. So it is always important to confirm with the outside agency what types of funding they will cover, so tuition or a computer or what have you. There is a cap on the amount of the reimbursement that can be received. Just to note quickly, as a Gates Scholar, they have a cap of $2,000. For Jack Kent Cook Scholars, most students qualify for a cap of up to $1,800. STEM majors have a slightly higher cap of $2,500. Anything else, the cap is $2,500. The purchase must be made out of pocket, and then you are going to submit receipts for reimbursement. I will note that as an example, let's say you have $4,700 in outside scholarships. The first $3,700 is going to reduce the student share, and then $1,000 is reducing your Yale scholarship. So your eligible reimbursement is going to be a maximum of $1,000. So it is dependent on how much your Yale scholarship is being reduced. And on the next slide, we will cover what types of items you are allowed to purchase. I won't read through all these. The important takeaway is that very top bullet. You can purchase a laptop or a desktop computer, but you could not also purchase a tablet. Both won't be covered. So it's either a laptop or a desktop or a tablet. Also, generally, the technology items should be related to your program of study. So for example, maybe dependent on your major, you might need a specific type of computer or something like that. I also wanted to touch upon other types of reimbursement requests beyond just technology. So again, this is only applicable if the outside agency specifically is allowing their funds to cover other types of expenses. So for example, there are outside agencies that will allow their funding to cover the cost of the Yale Health Plan. So it, again, must be a reasonable educational expense that you are requesting to have covered. So not only does the outside agency need to allow their funds to cover that cost, it also must be in adherence with Yale's institutional policy and any sort of financial aid policies and adhere with federal regulations as well. If you are requesting that additional travel, for example, be covered by an outside agency, the amount must exceed the allowance that we have already factored into our cost of attendance budget for determination of eligibility. The outside agency must provide a document in writing to indicate that it is a covered expense by them. You will submit that to the financial aid office. Again, just like with technology, we would need to see receipts. And these are approved on a case-by-case basis. And again, all of this information is being submitted directly to Yale. Finally, I wanted to touch briefly on the summer term. So while the summer term, so summer 2025 is still considered part of the 2024-2025 academic year, it is treated as its own separate term. So unlike the fall and the spring terms, there is no student share adjustment in summer. Your eligibility is basically the cost of attendance minus any other type of summer resource that you may be receiving. So for example, this could be the Yale Summer Session Scholarship, ISA. Those are examples of other summer resources. Again, you would need to confirm that the outside agency allows their funds to cover the cost of summer, and it needs to be noted appropriately on any payment that is sent to the university. So before we get to questions, as a recap, today we discussed definitions of outside resources, how to report them, the impact to the financial aid award versus the bill, types of reimbursement that can be requested to include technology and other types of reimbursement requests, in addition to summer outside resources.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. Do we have any questions from the audience? I don't see that anything came in the Q&A, but we'll give you guys a minute to see if you have any questions you wanted to ask. There are almost always questions about outside scholarships. All right. Well, it doesn't look like any questions are coming in, but for those of you who are in attendance today, or anyone who is watching this back on our website later, if you do have any questions at all about either loans or about outside scholarships, again, I know Nick mentioned this, please reach out to your personal financial aid counselor. If you don't know who your personal financial aid counselor is, if you visit the Yale Financial Aid website, under Contact Us, you can see who is assigned your counselor, and it's based off of your citizenship and or your last name. All right, so one question did come in. Can scholarship money be deferred for the next term cycle?
Yes, they can be deferred to the next term cycle or even a future academic year. And you as the student would be responsible for having that discussion with the outside agency and also making sure that our office has been updated so that we can adjust your award accordingly.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nick, for joining us today. Thank you to the attendees. Any questions that do come up after this presentation today, please feel free to reach out to our office. And we hope to see you at our next Friday with Financial Aid. More information will be posted in Yale Connect in the next few weeks. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.